Hello, and welcome back to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and welcome back to Be Wise Resize. I believe this is going to be the last of a very short series. I wanted to take a look at some specific special items that can be resized in Finale in unique ways, and I think I'm going to start with accidentals, actually. Now, many people may not be aware that you can actually resize accidentals individually in Finale, but of course we can resize them globally using the document options under fonts. There is in the notation here an option for accidentals, and obviously the way to do this is just change the font. So you could change from 24 to size 28, and that will indeed actually resize all of the accidentals and make them a little bit larger. What you should realize though is that it only affects the accidentals within the music. You can see that the key signature accidentals do not get changed. In order to change the key signature accidentals, go to notation and key and do the same thing, so we can make this 28 as well, and you can see that now the key signature accidentals will get a little bit larger. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. A 24-point size in Finale is pretty standard for music items, so I wouldn't really do that unless you had a pretty good reason to do so. But it is possible to resize individual accidentals, and you might have a specific reason for this. The way to do this is to go into the special tools here and the accidental tool, and what you can do is just either double click a handle on an accidental or select it and press return to get to this accidental settings dialog box, and you will see that here you can actually resize by a percentage. So we can change this to 125 if we want to make that accidental a little bit larger, or obviously a lot smaller if you need to, just like that. So individually resizing accidentals is certainly possible in Finale. And one case where this might be actually handy is things like this, where you have this cluster chord and you want to show this natural and flat sort of, much larger here. You can just go in here and say 150 and do this one, and do 150, and you're good to go. So you've got large accidentals on your cluster chord there. Now there is actually a way to do this a little bit more on a mass selection. Imagine I had a whole series of these. I can select the whole passage here, and with one of the JW plugins, the JW Change plugin, there is this in the accidental section, there is this resize, and you can just enter your resize percentage here, and it will resize all of the accidentals in the passage all at once. So that's another way to do that. All right, so that's accidentals. Let's look at the next thing, which is mid-measure clefs. So again, in the document options under Clefs, we do have this option here towards the bottom. It's called reduction, and it's set to 75%. So this will be the reduction of the clef size anytime you have a mid-measure clef. And 75% I think is fairly standard, but if you wanted it smaller, you could just set that to 50, and you'll see your bass clef got a lot smaller. Or if you set it to 100, then the size won't actually be any different than a regular clef if you want to do it that way. So again, globally, you can reset these mid-measure clef reductions like that. But more locally, if you wanted to, what you can do, and you probably could do this when you're first entering the clef, but if you've already got it, just select those measures with the clef tool, double click to get into this change clef menu again, and you see your bass clef selected here. But where it says show clef, it'll say when needed. However, if you switch to always here, then you have the option to change the clef percentage just for this particular clef. So we could say 50% here, and just like that, that one clef will be set to 50%. Or if for some reason you wanted that clef at 100%, you can just set it back to 100% and it will go to full size. So that's one way to individually resize the mid-measure clefs. Another thing that can be resized uniquely is grace notes, and once again we'll go into the document options under grace notes, and you can see two options here for grace note size. 60%, this is obviously 60% of full-size notes, and there's a special one for tablature grace notes if you're using tab. They have that set here at 85. The default for the regular grace notes is 60, but if you want that a little bit larger, if you wanted to see 70%, you can do that, and your grace notes will be a little bit larger. So that's how you would do that. Now, to resize an individual grace note, this is actually no different than resizing an individual note. Just use the resize tool, and instead of clicking here to resize the note, you can actually click above the grace note to resize the grace note. So we can go to 50%, and that will make that grace note even smaller. Now obviously this compounds, so that note, that grace note is actually 50% of 60%, so it's 30% of full size. That's how that works. And if you're curious, with 60% set in your grace notes, if you use a value of 166 here, then your grace note will become full size, if that's of any use to you at all. That's how you do that. And then the next thing I want to talk about is lyrics. It is possible to resize your lyrics in certain ways. Now, lyrics will resize with note resizing. So if I go in here and do resize note, this first one, you can see that it will go to 75% as well. It will not resize with note heads. So if I resize the note head will change, but the lyric will not. And obviously this is easier to do or better to do all at once if you use the utilities, change note size. We can do 75%, and the note size will get to 75%, but also the lyrics will. Now, in this particular case, there's one sort of bug that kind of drives me crazy about this in Finale, and it's very subtle, but you may notice that the hyphens themselves actually don't get resized. So just keep a close eye on the hyphen right here. I'm going to undo so that this goes back to 100%, and you'll notice that the hyphen is exactly the same size. So regardless of what you resize this tool, I can do note size 25 just to make this plainly obvious. You can see that the hyphens are way out of proportion now. So if for some reason those hyphens are not resizing when you do this, I kind of understand the technical reason for it. You know, the syllables are attached to the notes, but the hyphens are not attached to anything really. So yeah, it's kind of a weird little bug. Interestingly, if you resize the staff or the system or the page, you know, it will actually resize the lyrics, the notes, and the hyphens will get resized appropriately as well. So it's only when you resize the notes, which are resizing the lyrics, where the hyphen situation gets a little wonky. Now, lyrics themselves can be resized independently as well, and there's a few ways to do this. Again, let's go into the document options under fonts. We do have all of these lyrics options, so we can change the size of the font itself here. Now notice that there is an asterisk here, which again means that will only affect items created after font changes are applied. Existing items will not be changed. So because there's existing lyrics here, when I change my font size here to say 14, it will not change the font size in the file because these lyrics already exist and you're stuck with them at that point size. Well, you're not stuck with them, but you have to change them in a different way. Now, interestingly, if we go into the lyrics tool and you go into your lyrics window, you'll see verse 1 is set to Finale Lyrics 12 plain. And you notice that I changed the verse size in the document options to 14. However, if I go to verse 2, which is a new, fresh verse that hasn't been used yet, it'll say size 14. And in fact, if I enter lyrics in verse 2, it will come out as size 14. So just because there are already lyrics in this verse, changing the lyric size in the document options will leave this entire verse alone. In fact, if I keep adding lyrics here, it will still stay at 12. So that's what's going on. So in order to change this, what you have to do is, select all, go to text, go to size, and change it to 14, and then all of your lyrics will go up to size 14. Now, within this window, you can actually change individual individual lyrics by just selecting a single lyric. You can change the size to 18, and just that one word will get a lot larger. You can do all kinds of stuff in this window. You can boldface, italicize, underline lyrics. You can do it all within this window just like that. So yes, that's how resizing lyrics works. And then finally, let's talk about chords, because this is actually probably the most complicated thing in Finale, resizing chords. In the document options, under the chords section, there are two options here, scale all chords by and scale all fretboards by a percentage. So you can actually use this. And if I were to change the scale all chords to, let's say, 110% and click apply, it will indeed make my chords a little bit larger. Now there's a major problem, a major bug with this as far as I'm concerned. If I were to go in here and change these to to 150% and hit apply, yes, it changes the chords to 150%, and in most cases it looks okay, but immediately you'll notice that this G minor 6 chord is all out of whack. The 6 is overlapping the minor, and over here where I've got some more sophisticated suffixes, it's even more problematic. The major 7 is just all on top of each other. This is absolutely a bug in the way that Finale handles this resizing with the chords. The issue is that what Finale is doing is it's resizing the point size of the fonts, but it's not resizing the space between the characters. So, when you change the characters to a larger size, it needs more room, but it's not giving you more room because it's not proportionally changing the size. So what this really means is that you're kind of limited to how much you can go up or down with this scale all chords by percentage. Usually like about plus or minus 10 or 15% will be okay. If we put in 115%, I mean, even that's a little bit too close in this case, so maybe 110% is okay. And, going the other way, maybe you can get away with 85%. The tracking looks a little loose here, but you can kind of get away with it. So you really can't go too far. If you go to 50%, you can see how ridiculous that looks. There's so much space between the letters here. So not really great. It's an unfortunate bug that, it's just never been addressed. Scaling fretboards is different. You can do whatever you want with fretboards because these are sort of single items, and whatever you scale this to will be totally fine. You're not going to have that same kind of limitation. You can change that to 50% and it all looks perfectly normal. So it's just the scale all chords by percentage that gives you this issue. So then the question becomes, well, what is the better way to actually scale the chords to make them larger or smaller in your file, which you may want to do? Well, unfortunately, you kind of have to do this by font point size, and that's a little bit complicated because there's several things going on. There's the symbols themselves. There's the alterations to the symbols, which would be the sharp in this F sharp chord here, and then there's suffixes. So the MAJ7 is a suffix. And then within the suffixes, you have the letters, and sometimes you have the alterations within the suffix, like the 7 sharp 5. All of this is different characters. They're different point sizes, so they all have to be addressed differently. So the way I would go about this is like this. So you'd go into your fonts under where it says chords. Again, you have symbols, suffix, and alterations. Let's say we're going to change from 12 to 14, so we'll go in here and we'll change 14. Now this will indeed change all of the chord symbols in your document. That's good to go. Let's actually do the alterations next. Let's go from 15 to, say, 18. You do have to do a little bit of proportional math here. And by doing that, hit apply, you'll see that your sharp will get proportionally larger. And then we're going to do the suffixes. However, the suffix option here has an asterisk, which once again means that it will only affect items created after the font changes are applied. Existing items will not be changed. So I can change this to 13 and hit OK and hit apply, and nothing happens because all of these suffixes already exist, so they can't be changed retroactively. So if we go into the edit chord definition here, we go into this chord suffix selection dialog box, this is what I'm talking about. All of these suffixes already exist and they can't be affected by that option in the document options. So the solution is that you have to change the font size for all of these suffixes. Now, you could, if you really wanted to, go into the suffix editor for each of these suffixes, choose the M character, change the font to 13, but then you'd have to go to the A, change to 13, the J to 13, and then do that for every single suffix in your chord library. Now that's obviously ridiculous, and you would never want to do that. But Finale does give us a tool in the chord menu towards the bottom called change chord suffix fonts, and we can use this tool to help us out here. Now basically what you can do with this tool is you can search for all fonts or a specific font and replace it with a specific font, but you can also change the size and the style, or you can just change the size. So if you have font deselected and size selected in both places here, then you can just do a size replacement. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to have selected font size 11. This is what we're going to choose, and we're going to replace that with size 13. Do make sure that you have the fixed chord suffix spacing checked, because this will fix the spacing to accommodate the size change, and you click OK. and you just changed all of those 11-point fonts to 13-point fonts, which is going to match better with the change in the chord roots and the alterations, right? Now, the one thing that doesn't get changed is the sharp in the sharp 5 here, and there's a reason for that. If we go into this suffix and check it out, if we go over to the sharp symbol here, you'll notice that this is Finale Maestro 14, which it's a different size. And if you remember, we changed size 11 to size 13, but we didn't deal with size 14 fonts. So what we have to do is run that same operation again, change chord suffix fonts, except this time we're going to find 14-point fonts, and we're going to replace it with 16-point fonts. And just like that, again, make sure this option is checked. Just like that, you can now increase the size of those accidentals in the suffix themselves. So it's kind of a pain. You have to go through all of these processes just to get the chords a little bit larger, but from what I can find, from what I've been able to research, this is really the best way to go about it. One final thing, depending on how your chord suffix library is set up, some things may not convert. In particular, like things like the 6/9, if you take a look at this, you'll notice that it's using a slightly smaller size for these. These aren't 11 size font, they're 9. So then you'd have to run that again and say, okay, make all my 9-point fonts 11-point, etc. Again, it's just sort of a pain. Symbols like this, the triangle, this is set to 20. This is one symbol, so maybe you could do this manually, size 24, just to make it proportionally equal to everything else. And going through this process, it works pretty well. You may find that some of the things are still a little bit tight, so you can maybe do some adjustments here and there. But yeah, it's kind of a pain in the neck that this is sort of unfortunately the best way to deal with resizing chords. And of course, you can go the other way if you want to make them smaller. So yeah, it's just really, really unfortunate that this scale all chords by option here really has that flaw in that it's not scaling the spacing between the characters. This really should be fixed. It would make life a lot easier. Incidentally, you can also scale the chords individually or in groups. If you make a selection here and go to Utilities, Change Chords, towards the bottom here, you do have options for scaling chords and scale fretboards to a percentage, and this is kind of exactly like what you find in the document options. So we could scale the chords to 110%. We can also scale the fretboards to say 150. We could do both of these operations at the same time, and it will just affect the measures in this selection. So you click OK, and you see that your chords get slightly larger and your fretboards get much larger compared to the rest of the score. So it is possible to change the scaling that way on a sort of measure by measure basis. It's weird, there's actually no way to do this for an individual chord. So if I go to the chord definition here, you'd think that you might have the same options here, but unfortunately you don't. So I mean, I guess you could do it if you made a single selection like that, just so you're only affecting that one chord, and do the same thing. Change chords 110% to and 150%. Again, I don't know why you'd want to do this, but if you really needed to resize a single chord like that or a single fretboard, it's certainly possible to do that. So there you go. That is resizing chords. It's not necessarily friendly, but yeah, that's how you go about doing it. All right, and so that pretty much covers it. That's basically the Be Wise Resize category. There's a few things to it. I thought it was an important series of lessons to do, and I hope you've learned a lot. At the end of this series, I'm actually gonna tack on one video that I've already done. It's 22-6, and it has to do with fixed-sized fonts, because I think fixed-size fonts is very much relative to the whole conversation about resizing in Finale. So I think if you haven't watched that, it's definitely worth watching. And if you have watched it in context of these lessons, I think it might be good to rewatch it. So yeah, so after this, check out 22-6, and that will pretty much put a cap on resizing in Finale. All right, so once again, my name is Jason. I appreciate you watching. As always, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you soon on the next video.